There's some comedians that make shows this way, right? Driving the cars, talking. Anyway, so this is my version on my road trip with my family. We are now in lovely, and now we're about to start talking about Gwendolyn Brooks, one of our later 20th century authors. And the poet of hers that we read this week is called A Song in the Front Yard. Okay, so if you look at the written out lecture, there's a lovely photo of Gwendolyn Jackson. It would look at about, maybe it's from the 1950s, I would say, late 1950s, maybe early 1960s, based on the style of the clothing and the hairstyle. It's kind of like a modified bob, kind of rounded, different though from May Swenson's. May Swenson's was much more traditional, later 1960s. It's like an earlier style. All right, the printed out lecture, or the written out lecture, has, of course, more links if you'd like to know more about Gwendolyn Brooks and her works, extensive biographical literary information from different poetry societies, and an NPR, or several NPR segments on Gwendolyn Brooks, and a YouTube video sets to music, life information, and quotations from Gwendolyn Brooks. You may want to check those out. Gwendolyn Brooks is an American. She lived from 1914 till 2000. So, till about 83 years of age, she lived. Maybe longer than that. Let's just do the math. I might have been 86 years of age. Now that I subtract again, I think she lived to 86. Yeah, that looks about right. So she had quite a long life. Gwendolyn Brooks was born in Topeka, Kansas. Oh, I'm almost there. Give me a couple states. And I think I actually will be driving through Kansas, so neat. But she lived there until she was only 5 weeks old. Then she moved to the area which would define her for the rest of her life, the south side of Chicago. Oh, and hey, we're in Illinois right now. That's where Chicago is. Not driving through Chicago, though. We're in the southern part of the state. Anyway, the south side of Chicago has been in the news more recently as a home to Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey. So you may know it from those two more popular modern day references. Gwendolyn's mother was a former school teacher, and her father was the son of a runaway enslaved person who fought in the Civil War. Gwendolyn's father had wanted to be a doctor but could not afford medical school, so became a janitor instead. Gwendolyn showed a gift for writing at an early age. Her parents noticed this ability and nurtured it. Her father furnished her with shelves of books. Her mother took her to local poetry readings by famous Harlem Renaissance poets like Langston Hughes and James Weldon Johnson. At 13, Gwendolyn had her first poem published in a children's magazine. She attended a junior college and continued to write and publish at least 75 poems. That's a lot. But she still could not obtain the poetry columnist job she wanted with the African American newspaper called the Chicago Defender. So she became a typist until she was encouraged to participate in an intensive poetry workshop where she learned heavy-duty poetic technique, including traditional rhyme and verse form. Gwendolyn's poetry is marked by wordplay and deftness with language, wit, rhythm, and rhyme. So yeah, obviously that study paid off. She used both traditional classic verse form as well as jazz and blues-inspired rhyme and rhythm. Kind of along the lines of what Langston Hughes did too with his poetry in some parts. Her poems also use street slang and idiom to capture the real-life ethos of the Chicago South Side, as does the poem of hers that we read for class, A Song in the Front Yard, published in 1945. Her writings embody racial issues and also gender issues, but primarily in the terms of how they relate to race. Gwendolyn ran a famous poetry workshop for South Side African American teenagers called the Blackstone Rangers. In 1950, fairly early on in her career, Gwendolyn Brooks was the first African American woman to receive the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry. Now, that was a tremendous accomplishment, especially for that time period, right? 1950s, that is pre-civil rights era. So you can tell what an amazing poet she is, that she would have won that in 1950, early on in her career, pre-civil rights. In 1962, she was invited by President John F. Kennedy to read at a Library of Congress poetry festival. In 1968, she served as the Poet Laureate of Illinois, and in 1985, as Poet Laureate of the Library of Congress, perhaps the most distinguished poetry post in all of the United States. Unfortunately, with pen in hand, she died of cancer in 2000. But she still had a nice long life. It looks as if she lived till about 86. So, with that, please enjoy Gwendolyn Brooks. Read more about her in the anthology and read the work of hers that we studied this week, A Song in the Front Yard. I think you'll find it a delightful read, which is very down to earth and yet still touches upon some of those key issues that we see in not only American life, but women's life too. Yeah, so enjoy.